Either. And right now, what I'm going to do is I get the distinct pleasure of talking with Bill Elliott, who is a Tony Award winner for An American in Paris on Broadway, and also as pertinently, if not more so, for our current setting, a Grammy Award winner for his part in Barbara Hannigan's record Crazy Girl Crazy, which featured some Gershwin that we are going to be hearing right here from the Ojai stage. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
And I also, I meant in that honorarium, I also meant to cite one thing that I found really exciting and interesting, which is your long connection to one of the truly great heroes of American song, Michael Feinstein. So, I mean, you know, there's somebody who has done as much as anybody in my lifetime to preserve the great American songbook.
That's
and
right.
Just the art of songcraft and orchestration and arrangement. And this is something that you're intimately a part of. So first, I'm going to ask you something radically non-specific, which is just, how are you finding your first Ojai experience?
Well, I love it. I love it. I'm very happy to be here. I had a wonderful rehearsal. You know, my performance part of being here is that I'm the bandmaster tonight for a little dance group, members of Ludwig, and we're playing music that's unusual for this festival. I would think we're playing 19th century waltzes and tangos and foxtrots, and it's an outdoor. It's like a sort of beer garden atmosphere outdoors, and it's really fun. So, and this is with members of Ludwig, who I last saw when we recorded Barbara's Gershwin in Hilversum nearly 3 years ago. So I've had a wonderful reunion with all of them because we got very close during the time that we spent. So I'm having a ball.
That's really, really amazing. And I also I love the fact, and representatives of Ludwig were sitting here earlier today and talking about how they thought, well, if we're going to have an after party, why hire a DJ? Let's just be the band.
That's right.
I mean, that kind of exuberant expression of hands-on participation is something that I find very, very characteristic of Ojai. And so here's something that probably can't be answered in less than a semester, but let's give it a shot.
Okay.
You've worked extensively with the Boston Pops, with the New York Pops, the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra. And so I'm just curious, having heard all of those orchestras and appreciated them over my life, what makes a good, effective Pops arrangement? What do you need to do that is specific to the art of arranging for a Pops orchestra?
Well, one of the most important things that I do is something that is very different, which I didn't need to do for Barbara, so I'll explain the distinction.
Yes.
So when I write for the Boston Pops, for example, the rehearsal time is very, very short. And we play through brand new arrangements maybe once, maybe twice at most. But when I know I've done my job correctly is when we play a piece, Keith Lockhart says, okay, any questions? No questions, on to the next. then I've done my job.
That's right.
And so there's an art to writing something that sounds good, but is very sight readable and the players understand and so on. And yet it's not simplistic. It's not like it's music for middle school, but it's, there's an art to making it a certain type of thing. Now with Barbara, the process was so entirely different, and I don't know how much time we have to talk about it, but the main thing I'll say about it is that we wrote something so complicated and elaborate that the first time we read it, it was a mess. But we had 4 days to rehearse it, which is unheard. And after the 4 days of rehearsal, it was something magical, which is beyond anything that I could achieve, with one reading with the other orchestras. So that was very special.
Well, I do actually want to come back and hit you with some specific questions about the Gershwin, but I'm curious to know, I had a lot of experience with Keith and with the Boston Pops during my couple of years at the Boston Globe, so I definitely know what you're talking about with the sort of efficacy of an arrangement that sounds good but can also be picked up by musicians quickly. I'm literally curious if there were specific forebears or mentors that you had in mind heading into this particular area of work, because it is a very specific craft.
Well, I'll mention a couple of my heroes.
Yeah, please.
Robert Russell Bennett, great orchestrator.
Yes, okay.
Conrad Salinger, the greatest MGM orchestrator. Andre Previn, with all the different things that he did.
Absolutely.
And there I'm speaking of arrangers and orchestrators. And then before that, of course, the composers. And Gershwin and Bernstein have been primary to me since I was 12. So I've been very fortunate, especially to be working a lot with Gershwin music on Broadway. Even before American in Paris, my first Gershwin show was called Nice Work If You Can Get It. And we had a lot of Gershwin songs.
Right.
And then I did American in Paris. I did a wonderful version of the concert piece American in Paris with Keith and the Pops, which was recreating the 1938 Paul Whiteman version.
Wow.
Which was
now that's
obscure.
a specificity.
It was different. And the funny thing is, it didn't sound that different, but on paper it was very different. And plus it was shorter and so on. So I've had a lot of this music in my life in recent years. It's been a great joy.
And you've also, if I'm remembering correctly, you've also done a lot with the music of Sinatra, which it's music associated with Sinatra, but there are very specific composers and arrangers associated with that body of work as well.
Well, that's right. Yeah, Nelson Riddle and Billy May being the two primary
exactly.
ones. Yeah, and my work with Michael led me to my work on Broadway. Because I did 2 albums with Michael. The first one called The Sinatra Project, where I was writing in the styles of Nelson Riddle and Billy May.
Right.
That led me to work on my first show in modern times, which was Robin and the Seven Hoods at the Old Globe Playhouse, where I met a bunch of Broadway people, and then they brought me to Broadway, and the next thing I did was the revival of Anything Goes with Sutton Foster and then Nice Work. So through Michael, I met all the Broadway people, and got this wonderful experience.
Well, and it's a tremendous thing to be reminded. I mean, you cited some very specific names there, Robert Russell Bennett and Andre Previn and Leonard Bernstein, and I would throw in Morton Gould as being emblematic of an era in which the divide between popular music and classical music didn't seem nearly so stark, and everything was coming to everybody on national radio networks. And there was kind of I'm struggling for the right word, but there was a familiarity that people had with the classics and classic pop and could consume all of it with some authority and some glee.
That's right. Well, classical music, I think, reached its peak. People generally agree it reached its peak around 1939 as part of our culture.
That's right.
And when people like Jose Iturbi were movie stars.
Right, exactly. And when every household in America knew the name Toscanini.
Right.
Sure, okay. Well, instead of lamenting the bad old days,
well, we have some pretty good days going.
We absolutely do, and I find this project with Barbara extraordinary on multiple levels because of the fact that she is singing and conducting, because of the fact that she is mixing Gershwin with things that would seem to be not so connected to Gershwin, but as she very eloquently explained yesterday, there are actually some very fundamental connections between Alban Berg and Gershwin.
They admired each other.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so is that something that you were already deeply aware of before Barbara?
No, I wasn't really. I wasn't. And I should mention that the path that brought me here was that Barbara asked Tom Morris, do you know an arranger who knows Gershwin?
Of course.
And Tom, having worked at the Boston Symphony, asked Dennis Alves of the Boston Pops, who's an arranger you work with who knows Gershwin? And I had fortunately just won the Tony for American in Paris and been working on other Gershwin things. So Dennis recommended me, and then also at the same time, Barbara was coming to perform with the Boston Symphony. She did Let Me Tell You. With Andres Nelson's.
I slogged through the snow to get to that concert.
Right. So and yes, that's right. It was snow. It was February, I think. So we met then and hit it off like gangbusters, and that's what led us to do our thing.
So how did she explain to you the kind of project that she had in mind?
Well, she said that she wanted to do Gershwin songs from Girl Crazy, and so my first thought when she got that far was, well, I've done things like this for the Boston, but some of these songs I've done before in other versions, but not for me. Embraceable You, I Got Rhythm. I've done other multiple arrangements of those songs for various shows and films and TV and so on. So I started thinking in that direction. I thought, well, I know this. And then she started describing, well, how she wanted to be a companion piece to Berg's Lulu Suite. Okay, all right. Well, let me think about the connection there. So I had to do some homework because, I had not really paid a lot of attention to Berg since I was a teenager.
Sure.
And I went back and looked at the music and also read in the biographies about the connection between Berg and Gershwin, having admired each other. And then I looked at pieces like Gershwin's Variations on I Got Rhythm, which has some of the modernist things going on, and my favorite Gershwin piece, the Second Rhapsody, which is actually my personal favorite. It's become my personal favorite Gershwin piece. So he was paying attention to what was going on, not just on Broadway, not just in popular song, but he was listening to Berg and people like that.
I think that fact becomes clear even when you, well, I was going to say even, but especially when you listen to something like Porgy, that his ears were so deep and wide and broad.
Yeah, that's right.
And he tended to undersell his own talent, but again, Barbara told everybody at the talk that that Berg had said, no, you play the piano for us, you're Gershwin, you're the only you, and sort of bolstered the fact that Gershwin was an original with just brilliant things to say. Now, spoiler alert, I understand that one of the things that was done here, and I don't need to get into some sort of technical exegesis of the whole thing, but I understand that there are actually tone rows from Lulu embedded into the arrangement.
She sent me a page of all the tone rows, and I listened so I understood them and saw how they were used, and I snuck them in here and there.
Okay.
And where they made sense. And that was certainly something brand new for me. I can't say I put tone rows into my work for the Boston Pops or Broadway, but
although maybe now,
maybe now. So Barbara gave me a great education, and I think she's already talked about our wonderful collaboration, where for months we sent a piano vocal version back and forth, editing each of us putting edits in for the other. And we worked on that for a long time and got that the way we wanted, and then I orchestrated it. But we really had a wonderful collaboration, sharing that back and forth.
And that is again very much in a spirit. I mean, when I talk in generalities about Ojai and about the kinds of things that I've witnessed here, this is only my third year, but I feel like part of the family in that I've witnessed so many of these collaborative projects where it's not just one person doing a task or a job or an assignment, but a real bonding and something that comes out at the end that could only have been made by multiple minds working together in harmony, and possibly occasional dissonance or friction, but to come up with something that literally didn't exist in the world before.
That's right. And I should say also, it was so thrilling having taken the time that we did. Then we first did it in Lucerne with the Mahler Chamber Orchestra in August of 2016, and then we went to Hilversum in the Netherlands and rehearsed it with Ludwig, and then we took it to Italy to the festival in Turin and Milan, and played it there, and then we came back to Hilversum and recorded it, and it was a great thrill to be doing all that.
Now, I have to ask, and perhaps the answer is no, and that would be legitimate, but I just wonder, do you hear or think of Gershwin differently now than you did before you embarked upon this?
That's a good question. I do. I'll say my understanding of Gershwin keeps getting deeper and deeper. I mean, he was the first composer that I just fell in love with, as I said, around age 12, 13. And I understood, and for me, it was Rhapsody in Blue and American in Paris.
Of course.
That by the Boston Pops, by Arthur Fiedler. The record by Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops. So
I would cross my heart now, but I've been told to stop slapping my microphone. But Fiedler, yes, that is.
So I
American
had that record,
right.
and that introduced me to a wonderful world of music. But then working on the shows, doing obscure Gershwin songs that are not as well known, and then working on Barbara's piece, I have my understanding of Gershwin keeps getting deeper, and especially the harmony. His harmony, he invented all of jazz harmony. It's all there in him. 20 years before it reached jazz arrangers and so on. But they all, people like Andre Previn and Johnny Mandel, all those people were, as teenagers, were listening to Gershwin and grasping the harmony.
Right, exactly. And there's something about it, too. I mean, it just feels kind of appropriate to have this music happening in California. I mean, I know Gershwin was a man of the world and not pinned down to any particular location, but Ojai is a place where Stravinsky set foot, and where, you know, Los Angeles was the home of Schoenberg at that period.
That's right.
And there's just something that feels very appropriate and fitting about having these pieces happening at Ojai, so close to Los Angeles, where at the Hollywood Bowl, you know.
That's right. And
so
Gershwin and Schoenberg were tennis partners.
exactly.
And,
we heard
Beverly
there's a
Hills.
YouTube clip
them
of that,
playing, really?
them
Oh, I
playing,
haven't
evidently,
seen that. That's
which I only
wonderful.
heard about that yesterday, and
Oh,
I
I
haven't
love that.
Googled it yet. But
Oh, that's great.
We can do that at intermission.
Okay, great.
You know, there's so much to look forward to, and I really, really genuinely appreciate you taking the time to
Well,
come
my
up and
pleasure,
chat.
Steve.
It's really
and,
been
I know you'll enjoy the concert tomorrow.